I worked hard because my mother taught me to. How many moves ahead I saw depended on the position. During a game, I tried to recall my preparation and calculate variations. My memory was good, but not photographic. Everyone seems to look for a universal recipe to achieve great results, as if tools or rituals are responsible for success. But we are each one of a kind, shaped by countless elements from our DNA to this afternoon. We each build our own unique formula for making decisions. The goal is to understand that formula, evaluate it, and find ways to improve it. And this is an excerpt from the book we're going to talk about today, How Life Imitates Chess by Garry Kasparov.
Welcome to Performers, the podcast that takes you into the minds of the world's most extraordinary athletes, coaches, and performers. We're your hosts. I'm Dr. Greg Young, and you've just heard from Dr. Duncan Simpson. As sports psychology experts, we'll guide you through the pages of their autobiographies, revealing the mindsets, strategies, and habits that propelled the world's best to the pinnacle of their fields. Our goal is to help you learn from history's greatest performers. For each episode, we read and then condense entire autobiographies into concentrated insights representing over 20 hours of work per episode. So you not only gain the collective wisdom of these elite performers, but also access to over 30 years of our professional expertise in sports psychology. Listen to this, you're saving countless hours while accessing the distilled wisdom and proven strategies of the best in their fields. These episodes, they take a huge amount of time, care, and effort to create. It really is a labor of love. So if you found value in what we're doing here and you do want to support the show, you can do so by clicking the donate link in the show notes. It helps us continue bringing you the kind of stories that incite and inform, challenge, and inspire. Every bit of support genuinely helps, and we do truly appreciate it. So Duncan, tell us a little bit about Garry Kasparov and his book today.
Well, Garry Kasparov is the youngest undisputed world champion in history at the age of 22. He was the world champion from 1985 to 2000 for 15 years straight. He's widely considered one of the greatest chess players of all time, if not the greatest chess player. He was ranked number one in the world for 225 out of 228 months from 1986 to 2005. He won Lineards, which is the Wimbledon of chess, 9 times. He was the first player to break the 2,800 rating barrier in 1990. Now, I'm sure you don't know what that is, but I'll explain it.
Good, because I haven't got a clue.
And he also held the highest chess rating ever of all time at 2,851. So what does that mean, Greg, right? So there is a rating system called the Elmo rating system, which basically is a numerical scoreboard for how strong a player is. So if you're a beginner, then you're kind of 1,200 or less. If you're between 1,400 and 800, maybe you're a club player, and so on and so on. 2,500 and above are considered Grandmasters. If you're 2,700, you are considered world-class elite. And if you reach 2,800, you entered the rarefied air of superhuman territory. So, and apparently there's only 9 players ever to have reached that target, and he was the first. He maintained a world number one ranking for nearly 20 years. He is really well known for his man versus machine chess match, which was against IBM's Deep Blue supercomputer. He defeated IBM's Deep Blue in their first match, lost the second, which was a rematch, and we'll get into that story a little bit later. He is the author of numerous books. He's really regarded as a thought leader. He's heavily involved in activism and politics. He's very vocal pro-democracy in Russia, which means he's anti-Vladimir Putin. He's the founding member of the United Civil Front, a movement opposing Putin's regime. He's been arrested multiple times for peaceful protests and political activism. He's the chairman of the Human Rights Foundation. He speaks regularly in global forums on AI, democracy, and human rights. He's active in education and tech ethics, including commentary on AI and human collaborations. He was the chess Oscar winner 11 times, which is basically the best player in the world. And of course, with that resume, he was inducted into the Chess Hall of Fame. I didn't know there was one, but I assumed there would be one.
The Chess Hall of Fame, believe it or not, is in St. Louis.
Oh, there we go. And you reside in St. Louis?
I do, and I have not been to the World Chess Hall of Fame. But I know it's here.
Yeah, and I'm sure many of our listeners, they might have played chess, but probably couldn't care less about chess if we're honest. But this book, of course, yes, it's rooted in chess, but it's actually really packed in life lessons. And it's really about how we understand ourselves, how we improve, and how we perform under pressure. It's a really unique book. I really actually enjoyed reading it. And even if you don't care about chess, we're not actually going to talk a lot about chess. He's a really, really deep thinker. And the book actually does a lot of the work that we usually do by kind of breaking down life lessons. So we're going to really listen to Garry Kasparov's wisdom and do our best to, potentially add to it, but really listen to a man who's, I'd say, is an absolute genius. As such, it is not a traditional autobiography, and it's very similar to Mamba Mentality by Kobe Bryant. That's kind of more by theme rather than a chronological autobiography.
That sounds great. Why don't we jump in, Doug?
Let's jump in. He says, I'm often asked what separates an elite chess player, one in the top 10 in the world, from the many strong players who never crack the top 20 or top 100. Unfortunately, there are many reasons for failure as there are for success. It is impossible to make broad generalizations. Each player has his or her own reasons for success or failure. The most debated amongst these is the elusive quarry of talent. There are so many definitions and aspects of talent that it's little wonder we have trouble deciding who has it and who doesn't. Prodigies make this easy, but we can do little more than marvel at the likes of Mozart, who composed symphonies at the age of 5, or Pascal, who is creating original geometric theorems on the walls of his childhood home at the age of 12. Chess, along with music and mathematics, is one of the few pursuits in which superior ability and originality can manifest at a very young age. We are all familiar with tales of such precociousness, and in general are willing to accept that these individuals are born with special gifts. Still, even their extraordinary talents require the opportunity to display them. The nature versus nurture debate cannot be so easily resolved. Had his father been a painter instead of a music teacher, would we know who Mozart was today? So, Greg, a nice, easy one to start with, that notion of talent. What are your thoughts?
My first thoughts are this is going to be a very different book to Second Innings by Andrew Flintoff that we did in the last episode. That's my first thought. I think my second thought is here's talent again, right? It's that really seductive old myth. And it's funny, Duncan, because every time we talk about this, I feel like people really want talent to be the answer. They want greatness to be this mystical birthright. Either you've got it or you don't, because then they're off the hook. Oh, I wasn't born like Michael Jordan, or I wasn't born like Serena Williams, so I guess that's not really my fault. It's not for me. But I think what Kasparov nails here is something really critical. It's even the prodigies need the right environment. Mozart still needs a piano and a dad that can teach him how to play it. Talent can get you in the door for sure, but it's not what keeps you in the room. What we see time and time again is resilience, focus, adaptability, decision making, particularly all of those things under pressure. Those are the real separating factors. And I love that he challenges the idea that talent is this sort of one-dimensional thing. That's why some really talented juniors across a lot of different sports, they flame out. Talent without emotional regulation, without work ethic, it's like a Ferrari without any fuel in the engine. So here's what I really think the take home is. I think talent sets the ceiling, but your habits, your environment, your work ethic, that sets the floor. And what makes a difference over a long period of time is that floor, because at the elite level, everyone's talented. That's not in question. The question is, who can continue to keep climbing when that novelty wears off and the grind really kicks in?
Well, I threw you a grenade to start with, and you've handled that one pretty well. So he goes on. My own early development certainly owed a great deal to external factors. My natural aptitude for chess was quickly discovered by my family. My father Kim, then struggling with leukemia, made the decision to send me for chess schooling at the age of 7, and my mother enthusiastically supported his decision. Nowadays, she likes to remind me how her efforts were often directed at controlling my willfulness rather than promoting it. Just about every young star in any field can give credit to a determined parent giving talent a push. As for internal factors, it is clear to me that I would not have achieved such success at anything other than chess. The game came to me naturally, its requirements fitting my talents like a glove.
Duncan, it sounds like the holy grail of performance psych. It's that talent meets the environment. Again, his dad's got leukemia. Imagine if his dad never got sick, then it's really unlikely that he'd actually be sent away to chess school. And as they say, the rest is history, right? What I think he's describing here is the idea that Elite performance explodes when someone's sort of natural cognitive tendencies or wiring finds the right outlet. And in this case, chess just didn't suit him. It absolutely completed him. It was a perfect fit into the puzzle piece. And like he says, it fits really, really well. But what's equally powerful is that parental piece. Is it nurturing? Not really, but it is a push as he describes it. And that's Kasparov's point. Behind every prodigy, there is usually a parent steering the wheel. And we've seen that with other performers too. So here's the takeaway. I think talent alone, not enough. Support alone, not enough. But talent plus environment plus belief, that's how you create some of the greatest of all time.
Did you get sent away to chess school?
Uh, Chess school in Newcastle. Are you kidding?
Yeah, no such thing.
No such thing.
So we've already touched on the notion of talent and how it needs to be nurtured. And he says, like the proverbial tree falling in a forest with no one around to hear it, talent undiscovered may as well not exist. We can, however, mourn the talent that goes underdeveloped, talent that is found and then squandered. We often reserve the highest prize for those who overachieved with limited natural abilities, those who outworked and outperformed rivals with greater genetic gifts. That tendency has always struck me as unfair. Why isn't the capacity for hard work considered a natural gift? It's not much of a compliment to say someone did more with less. If a football player who is short and slow practices more than everyone else and becomes the superior player, has he not overcome a deficit or simply exploited his surplus of talent in other areas?
Duncan and I love this. We are so quick to praise the grinder, the overachiever, as if effort is some sort of consolation prize. But Kasparov's point is powerful. What if work ethic is a form of talent? What if discipline, persistence, and the ability to delay gratification are just as genetically influenced as sprint speed or spatial IQ? And research backs it up, right? Angela Duckworth in her book calls it grit. But even she admits not everyone's wired the same when it comes to sustained effort over time. Some people are just mentally geared to go again, to obsess, to endure that boredom of service to a bigger goal. So yeah, Duncan, maybe we need to stop separating effort from talent because consistency is a superpower.
Yeah, and what that really exposes, Greg, is our bias towards the visible. We praise that natural flair because it's kind of easy to spot, right? A killer pass from someone like Pirlo or a flash of brilliance from someone like Kobe. But no one's applauding the kid staying after practice every day for kind of 10 years straight. And maybe it's a shift, right? Stop thinking of hard work as compensation for a lack of talent and start seeing it as actually a category of talent in itself. As you mentioned, grit, I think curiosity, resilience, they're not personality quirks, they're actually performance assets. However, having said all of this, he does point to the fact that perhaps he didn't have the same distractions as today's youth. And he says, it was easier 30 years ago. There were fewer distractions, fewer acceptable activities for a child, especially in the USSR. Today, distractions are virtually unlimited, and instant entertainment is available to everyone. If discipline sounds dull or impossible in today's fast-paced world, we should consider what areas of our lives we can program and target for efficiency. Having a good work ethic doesn't mean being a fanatic. It means being aware and taking action. How did we spend our waking hours today? How will we spend them tomorrow?
Duncan, you're right. Distractions are virtually unlimited, as he says. In fact, you can pull up your phone and start to play chess on it if you want. But he is spot on. I think we do romanticize that discipline like it's this almost ancient virtue, but half the battle today is just navigating the chaos of choice. And it's not that kids don't want to be great, that's just that they're drowning in dopamine. And I love how he reframes discipline here, not as this monastic grind, but as awareness plus action. Duncan, we've heard the following consistently from our performers. They don't live perfectly controlled lives. They're human and they make mistakes. Some drank too much or indulged in other things that fame had to offer. And they just win more moments than they lose.
Well, my first thought was how boring was 1960s, 1970s USSR when chess was a really good source of entertainment.
But Cold War Russia. Yeah, I can't imagine it was a hotbed of action.
So, discipline alone isn't enough, and he says, invoking imagination is not a contradiction of the need for discipline. Creativity and order must guide calculation. Circumstances and instinct inform us when to break routine. The best move might be so obvious it doesn't require analysis, but this is rare, and when we assume something is obvious and react hastily, we often make mistakes. More often, we should break routine by doing more analysis, not less. These are moments when instincts warn that something is lurking below the surface, or a deeper look is needed at a critical juncture. Greg, a little bit deep here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is brilliant. And it really is a nuance that a lot of performers and often coaches as well, they miss. Discipline builds the foundation, but imagination builds the house, if you think of it that way. So Kasparov's talking about the tension between routine and improvisation or imagination, between the structure that gets you to the table and the creativity that wins you the game. And I love that he says it's not either or, it's a yes and, it's both. You need creativity within those constraints. So take Tom Brady, for example. Rigid preparation guy, film, reps, routines. But then in the moment when he's under pressure, he might shift the protection, read a safety, change a receiver, or throw the back shoulder that wasn't part of the plan. That's calculation that's guided by instinct. That's disciplined imagination.
Oh, I love that. Disciplined imagination.
Sounds like a new aftershave, doesn't it? By Louis Vuitton. Disciplined imagination, available at all good retailers.
I'll get you some for Christmas.
Lovely.
All right, so on to a little bit of self-awareness. And he says, it's not enough to be talented. It's not enough to work hard and to study late into the night. You must become intimately aware of the methods you use to reach your decisions. Self-awareness is essential to being able to combine your knowledge, experience, and talent to reach your peak performance. Few people ever take the opportunity to perform this sort of analysis. Every decision stems from an internal process, whether at the chessboard, in the White House, or at the boardroom, or at the kitchen table. The subject matter of those decisions will be different, but the process can be very similar.
Yeah, Duncan, that line, every decision stems from an internal process. That's basically the mission statement of this podcast, I think, to learn from history's greatest performers who share their internal processes through reflection in their books. Like I say at the beginning, we're here to unpack the minds of history's greatest performers, their thinking patterns, habits, their mental models, and that's where the real separation lives. And we're biased, of course, but let's be honest, at the elite level, it's not physical ability that separates, it's how you think under pressure, how you adapt, how you choose when the moment chooses you.
Yeah, I love that line too, and I'm glad you picked it out. Every decision stems from an internal process. So, having said that, we're going to talk a little bit about data. And he says, during my 30 years as a professional chess player, we've gone from researching an opponent by digging through musty books and journals for days to being able to pull up every single game in his career in seconds on a PC. It used to take us months for tournament games to be published in specialist magazines. Now anyone can watch the games on the internet in real time. The implications of information revolution go much deeper than matters of convenience. With more data becoming available more quickly, the ability to deal with this information must also move more quickly. An idea that took weeks to develop can be imitated by others the next day. So everyone must also immediately be aware of it and prepare for it.
Duncan, this is a brilliant reminder. Access to information isn't the advantage anymore. It's what you do with it. It's the interpretation of that information. Everyone's got the data. Everyone's got film. Everyone's got stats. Everyone's got analytics. But Kasparov's point here is clear. In a world that is drowning in information, the edge actually goes to the one who can filter fast and act faster. It's not about who knows more. It's about who knows what to ignore. And that's psychology. That's cognition under load, the decision-making under pressure. So expertise is often about knowing what to ignore and just getting to the heart of the problem. Duncan, I think this is why mental performance matters more than ever. It's no longer about getting the data. It's about not getting distracted by it. And to be honest, that's a skill. It's trainable. And that's what the separating factor is now.
Yeah, there's so much absolute gold in there. And I think it's really wild to think about, right? You can basically take Ivy League classes for free online. You can go really deep on any topic you want in the world on a smartphone. The most important thing, as you say, is what you do with the data is what separates people. And he goes on to say, you do not become world champion without being able to play in different styles when necessary. Sometimes you are forced to fight on unfamiliar terrain. You can't run away when conditions aren't your liking. The ability to adapt is critical to success. Occasionally, you can even switch styles by design to catch your competitor off guard. although this always contains the risk of a trapper being trapped. The ability to adapt on demand served Napoleon Bonaparte well for most of his legendary career. He was famous for maintaining the element of surprise on the battlefield, particularly by pressing on with an attack that had apparently stalled. But he was not above using his own reputation for aggression to entrap his enemies. So, Greg, we've used that term, fight the war you're in and not the war you wish you were in. That's basically what he's saying here, isn't it?
I think that's bang on. The line sums it up perfectly. Too many performers lose because they're trying to force their game onto a situation that's already changed. But Kasparov saying the best don't resist the terrain. They read and they respond to that terrain. And it's strategic flexibility. Whether it's on a chessboard, a football pitch, or in a boardroom, you win by adapting faster than your opponent does. Simple as that. I think we can point to the fact that most of our performers at some point, Duncan, have demonstrated that high-level adaptability throughout their careers in some shape, form or fashion.
Yeah, some really great takeaways there, Greg, and it really flows very nicely into this section. And he says, change can be essential, but it should also be made with careful consideration and just cause. Losing can persuade you to change what doesn't need to be changed, and winning can convince you everything is fine, even if you're on the brink of disaster. If you are quick to blame faulty strategy and change it all the time, you really don't have any strategy at all. Only when the environment shifts radically should you consider a change in fundamentals. We must walk a fine line between flexibility and consistency. A strategist must have faith in his strategy and courage to follow it through, while remaining open-minded enough to realize when a change is required. Success is seldom analyzed as closely as failure, and we are quick to attribute victories to superiority rather than circumstance. When things are going well, it is even more important to question. Greg, again, so much gold in here that I think can be applicable to any performance domain. So what's your take?
Yeah, that's wonderful hearing you read that. I think what he's describing is a psychological trap of false feedback. We think that losing means that we must change and winning means we don't have to. But in reality, both of those things can actually lie to you. And I love that line. If you change all the time, you don't have a strategy. I'm going to repeat that. If you change all the time, you don't have a strategy. I think real strategy requires conviction, like real courage to stick to it, and the awareness to shift only when the environment truly demands it. And Duncan, it's a classic danger of success. When you're winning, no one questions anything, and that's the dangerous part. That's when the rot can start to set in.
Yeah, again, just there's so much gold in here, and I really love these next few sections, and I'll do my best to pronounce a name here. And he says, in his book on Japanese business, Kenichi, no, I can't.
Kenichi Omaya.
Yeah, Kenichi Omaya summed up the role of a strategist this way. The strategist method is to challenge the prevailing assumptions with a single question. Why? Why is the question that separates functionaries from visionaries, mere tacticians from great strategists. You must ask the question constantly if you are to understand and develop and follow your strategy. When I watch novice students play chess, I'll see a terrible move and ask the student why he played it. Very often he'll have no answer at all. Obviously something in his brain pushed that move forward as the best choice, but it goes without saying that it wasn't part of a deeper plan with a strategic goal in mind. Everyone would benefit greatly from stopping before each move, each decision, and asking, why this move? What am I trying to achieve? And how does this help me to achieve it? Chess shows us the power of why in a very clear manner. Every move has consequence. Every move either fits into your strategy or it doesn't. If you aren't questioning your moves consistently, you will lose to a player who is playing with a coherent plan. Greg, as you hear, again, this is the theme throughout the book, he's talking around chess, but it's not actually really about chess. It's about these life lessons that you can take out of it. And here it's about strategy.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That single word, why, is the sharpest tool a strategist has. And Kasparov really nails the difference here. He says tacticians act, strategists understand. And we see it all the time in high performance. Athletes go through the motions and leaders chase outcomes, but they don't really stop to truly interrogate the choices that they make. And I think that's where the game's lost, not in the execution, but in intention. So asking why gives you leverage. It turns every action into part of a system or a map or a plan or a direction, not just a reaction. The athletes who rise are the ones who think like this. Why am I training in this way? Why this tactic? Why now? Why am I avoiding this conversation or chasing this goal?
Greg, great questions there. In this section, he differentiates strategy from tactics, and he kind of really brings this theme home. He says, tactics is knowing what to do when there is something to do. Strategy is knowing what to do when there is nothing to do. And I love that. To make the right moves, we have to know what we're looking for. No quantity of analysis can give us the answer to this question. Chess has a relatively simple objective: to win. To achieve victory, we establish strategies and decide on the right course of action. The words strategy and tactics are routinely used interchangeably, a waste of many valuable distinctions. Strategy is abstract and based on long-term goals. Tactics are concrete and based on finding the best move right now. If you don't immediately exploit a tactical opportunity, the game will almost certainly turn against you. Imagine a football game, soccer for the listeners, where the opposing goalkeeper slips. You toss strategy aside and you shoot for goal. It's a purely tactical reaction. A tactician thrives on reacting to threats. His move is how to make progress when there is no obvious moves. In chess, we are obliged to move. You can't skip a turn. This burden often leads a player without strategic vision to force a crisis and damage his own position. We make decisions based on analysis and experience. The goal is to be conscious of that process and improve it. The worst enemy of a strategist is a clock. Time trouble reduces us to reflex and reaction. Emotion and instinct cloud strategy when there's no time for proper evaluation. Even the best intuition needs accurate calculations. A game of chess can suddenly seem like a game of chance. Good strategy can fail with bad tactics.
Wow, Duncan, there's a ton in there. There's one insight in there that I'd like to read again. He says, tactics is knowing what to do when there is something to do. Strategy is knowing what to do when there is nothing to do. There's a big takeaway there for our listeners. This is about your ability to think beyond the moment that you're currently in. Most people react. Great performers respond, and there's a massive difference there. Tactics are what you do when you're under pressure: quick pass, tight call, a little bit of a pivot maybe in a meeting. Strategy is the system you're trying to build over time, the reason why that pass matters or that meeting actually just exists in the first place.
Yeah, that's really good, Greg. But let me say, if I'm sat at home and listening to this, that's quite conceptual. Can you give us a few examples, perhaps, that makes it a bit more tangible?
Yeah, I suppose that's fair criticism. One way to try and make it tangible is to think about during mid-performance, ask yourself some questions. Am I playing the short game or the long game right now? And if you're always tactical, you're always firefighting, you're always playing the short game. Strategy, that prevents burnout and panic because you're playing the long game. You know where you're trying to go over a longer period of time. You've also got to think about designing time to think about things, not just time to do things. Kasparov talks about that. The worst enemy of the strategist is the clock, I think was roughly what you said. Schedule thinking the way that you'd almost schedule training. Otherwise, you're going to default to reflex and reaction as opposed to having a clear plan and a clear response. The third thing, and finally, I'll leave you with this point, is maybe start tracking some of your decision triggers. So what I mean by that is, when do you start shifting from long-term thinking to short-term thinking? When does that mode kick in? What's the trigger? Are you tired? Is it fatigue? Is it pressure? Is it a time constraint? Is it feedback? The more you learn that rhythm, the more you're going to be able to get ahead of it and not necessarily have those quick reactions in the moment under pressure, but be able to rely on that strategy over a longer term.
Fantastic, mate. 3 really good takeaways, and especially number 2. And I use that a lot, of having to actually schedule time on my calendar to sit and think a little bit bigger picture, because you can get so caught up in the day-to-day, the tasks and the tactics, and not really strategic long-term planning. You really do have to plan that. And he goes on to say, the phrase hastening defeat is a very common one in the annotation of chess games. A player in a difficult position tends to make mistakes due to the psychological pressure of knowing he's in trouble. A more concrete motive for these collapses is that an inferior position is less able to withstand the loss of energy required by an attempt at an activity. If a company is in financial trouble, it can gamble on a risky venture or be conservative and fail slowly. Without stability, that risky venture could lead to a total collapse of the company, even if the gamble succeeds in its immediate objectives.
Duncan, I think what he's pointing out here is, and I got lost in the language a little bit myself, think what he's saying is that we see it all the time in sport and sounds like business here in life. When people are losing, or maybe even only when they feel like they're losing, they hit that big panic button. They either do nothing or they overcorrect the course. And both of them are actually forms of collapse. Panic sets in when you don't have a well thought out plan. Everyone gets nervous, but no plan equals panic. So here's a takeaway. If you're in a tough spot, you don't necessarily need more energy. You need better thinking. That's when your decision process really does matter the most. So if you're in a rough patch right now, don't just react to the pressure. Try and zoom out. Try and get stable. Try and get a little bit more strategic as opposed to tactical, because panic rarely solves the problem. In his words, it often just hastens defeat.
Pressure definitely makes everything feel like it's sped up. And you're right at the beginning. Some of the language and some of the way he phrases things are very rich and very deep. And it actually took me to read paragraphs a few times to really think through the paragraph and understand what the key takeaways are. And yeah, I think you've distilled that one down really well. And I'm glad I didn't have to handle that. So,
do you hear that, dear listener? You had to read it over and over again. We said over 20 hours. It might have been over 30 hours for this book. Duncan, we appreciate your sacrifice.
Thank you very much. So, jumping ahead, we're going to talk about innovation. He says, a powerful idea is like a new weapon in battle or being first on the market with a new product. The competitive advantage is maximized by the surprise factor. Innovation alone doesn't equal success. Being an innovator doesn't always translate into being a great success as defined by the worlds of business or sport. History is full of inventors who died penniless. Recognizing the significance of an innovation is critical, as is having the will and acumen to exploit it. What did they have that others do not? Why are some people more creative than others? Foremost, they share a certain degree of impracticality. This is a problem at the board, but an asset in generating new ideas. They churn out ideas without worrying if each one was flawless. Perhaps their initial success rate wasn't high, but with trial and error, more proved worthwhile. They establish a routine of creativity, but constant production of new ideas feeds and hones intuition. As Thomas Watson, the founder of IBM, put it, if you want to succeed, double your failure rate. If you aren't failing at least occasionally, you aren't taking the risks required to be an innovator. Fear of change is worse than changing too fast. There are few downsides to being an innovator, despite the occasional fiasco. Being too far ahead of the curve can rebound, but even those mistakes can spread new ways of thinking. Like many blunders, they are valuable in showing what doesn't work, which is often as important as what does. As my mother always put it, a negative result is also a result. Greg, again, lots of great stuff in here, I think. What are your key takeaways?
Yeah, it is. It's loaded with insight. I love that. There, his mother put it, a negative result's also a result. That's a great way to wrap it up. I think it is loaded with insight, as I said. First big takeaway, creativity is messy by design. You don't necessarily know which direction it's going to go. But he makes a powerful point here. The best innovators aren't necessarily the most practical or the most polished from the get-go. They're just people that are just relentless at generating ideas. They're willing to get it wrong and willing to get it wrong publicly in pursuit of eventually, hopefully, getting it right. If you want to succeed, double your failure rate. That's a really nice line. Most people really want creativity without discomfort. They want to be creative without messing up a bunch of times, but that's not how it works. You don't get breakthroughs without breakdowns. Second thing that jumps out, fear of change really is the real enemy. The only thing people are more scared of than change is the way things currently are. So many performers, athletes and coaches, they often hold back because they're scared to look foolish, or they don't really want to mess with things that might be working but might not be working perfectly. Kasparov, he completely flips that. He's saying, don't fear failing fast, fear stagnating really slowly. So to sort of summarize what I've just said there, innovation, it's not just about new ideas. It's about having the courage to test them, to refine them, and then survive the stretch between this might work and this actually worked. So listener, if you are wanting to grow, I think you've got to really stop waiting for the perfect idea. You've got to start building the courage to chase the imperfect ones.
Greg, I'm going to take you back to one line that I just absolutely love in there. Don't fear failing fast, fear stagnating slowly. That's such a great takeaway. And again, rolls really nicely into this quote. And he says, everything we have considered has pointed towards the making of better decisions. For a strategy to become reality, decisions must be made. For evaluations to become results, they must lead to decisions. After we have prepared, planned, analyzed, and calculated, we have to choose a course of action. Results matter, and they are feedback we get on the quality of our decision making. If you follow all the right steps and come out with the wrong answer, something has gone wrong. Still, we can't put all our faith in a single result. Doing things the right way matters, which is why math teachers insist students show they're working. We make decisions every day, and few require specific preparation, but it's still important to be aware of how these constant decisions fit with our larger goals. Even trivial choices like what we eat for breakfast relate to the rest of the day.
Duncan, here's a key idea that I love here. He separates the process from outcome. You can do everything right and still get a bad result. That's the unfortunate fact. It doesn't necessarily mean that the process was broken, though. And on the flip side, that's dangerous too. A good result doesn't always mean that you made the right call or you had the right course of action. That's where most people get lazy. They win and assume that the process is fine. This actually applies to everything, Duncan, to training, to nutrition, to match day tactics. The elite performers, they really do zoom out and ask, how did I get to that decision? Was that even repeatable or was it just lucky? What Kasparov's saying here is every little choice, even breakfast, either supports or undermines your big goal. Once you start owning your decisions, you start shaping your outcomes. I like to think about it that every action or every decision that you make is a vote for the person that you want to be in the future.
Oh, that was a great last line, and I was going to pick out the other line that you said. Once you start owning your decisions, you start shaping your outcomes. I also really like this next section where he traces back his development as a decision maker, and he says, when I considered my development as a decision maker, I go back to my childhood. I grew up in Baku, Azerbaijan, then part of the Soviet Empire. My mother was Armenian, my father was Jewish. The household blended my mother's rigid pragmatism with my father's contrarian creativity. My father's brother and cousin were Jewish intellectuals who constantly questioned the official view. They doubted conventional wisdom and subjected everything to scrutiny. My mother's skepticism came from scientific rigor. She didn't tell me what to think, only that I should question everything. Her engineering background taught her to look for concrete facts. Her father was a petroleum engineer and a die-hard communist, and she cared more about practical matters than ideology. Between these poles, I grew up reading books and asking questions. After my father died when I was 7, I went to live with my mother's family. When I began to succeed in chess, it seemed natural to take her family name. My teacher, Mikhail Botvinnik, himself Jewish, noted it wouldn't hurt my chances not to be named Weinstein. Greg, can you pull out some life lessons here from his parents?
Yeah, I think the first life lesson is very dangerous for a mother to tell their child that they should question everything. I think that's a dangerous game to be playing. There's really two things that stand out to me here, and I think these are life lessons that he's inherited, and together they're a really powerful blueprint for his future high-level decision making. Number one is from his mother, and that's rigorous thinking. She didn't tell him what to think, but more questioned and reinforced that idea of how to think. And this comes from her engineering mindset, and that's something she's passed on to him to teach him to seek facts, to stay grounded, and really to question everything, as I mentioned, not from a rebellious standpoint, but more from a logic-seeking standpoint. And that's real discipline and thought. The other side of that, from his father's side, is that idea of intellectual independence. He's learning to challenge convention here, to maybe even distrust easy answers and to really sort of scrutinize that narrative. And I think that's where his edge comes from. He talked about creativity and innovation before. That's probably where this comes from, where it's not just about absorbing information, but interrogating it, figuring out what to do with it, and then applying it.
For me, it was really interesting to hear this backstory because it absolutely plays into his current role as kind of a political activist. And it really does sound like he got the best of both worlds from his parents. And he goes on to say, intuition and instinct form the bedrock of our decision making, especially in rapid fire moments. Over time, our decisions become more accurate as we hone our intuition. And he goes on, Greg, he says, we definitely have an active role to play. We can't sit around and expect wisdom to accumulate with grey hair. Learning from our mistakes is the least we should expect. To get more, we must demand it, cultivate it, and go looking for it. Intuition is where it all comes together. Experience, knowledge, and will. Contrary to popular belief, we cannot truly have intuition in a field where we lack practical knowledge. Even vague hunches are based on something tangible. A positive impression of a co-worker may stem from a deeply embedded recollection of a voice, a face, or a name. That we cannot explain it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The biggest problem is not trusting our instincts enough. Too often we rely on gathering all information and doing exactly what it says. This reduces us to microprocessors and guarantees that intuition remains stunted. Greg, intuition is a tough one for someone to perhaps wrap their minds around. Can you make it super tangible?
Yeah, I think I can actually. And if I take away intuition, maybe for gut feeling, that's probably a word that resonates a little bit more with listeners. It's a wake up call for a lot of overanalyzers or a lot of overthinkers out there. Intuition or gut feeling, it isn't magic, it's memory in disguise. So when you get that gut feeling, when you just know, you're not actually guessing, you're really accessing deep, fast, pattern-based knowledge that you've accumulated over a really long period of time. So for listeners, performers, think about reviewing your performances. Don't just train hard, try and train aware so you can take those lessons from your performances. For coaches, you've got to really trust that coaching feel, not just the data. You have to use both. It is definitely yes and. And for everyone, you've got to start noticing your instincts, not necessarily second guessing them. Intuition or your gut feeling is your brain whispering, hey, I've seen this before. We've got information already on this.
Oh, I like that last one. We've seen this before. We've got information on it. Yeah, and I think intuition is one of those things that we can kind of put into those buckets, right? I either have really great intuition or I don't, but I think that's rarely the case. We have to work on our awareness and listen to our instincts when they really kick in. Greg, there's a Russian saying, even a bullet fears the brave. It's not a great saying, but it does lead us into this. I played aggressive chess because I was winning. My style worked, and I only made small adjustments when needed. I did what I liked, and what I liked worked. We try to align our style with what works, because at the end of the day, it's winning that matters most. Who runs a race wanting to come second? Who grows up wanting to be vice president? Putting limits on our ambition puts limits on our achievement. Having an aggressive philosophy also applies to being aggressive with ourselves. It's about constantly challenging ourselves, our environment, and those around us. It's the opposite of moral and physical complacency. Sportsmen and sportswomen talk about challenging themselves and playing at their best without worrying about opponents. There is some truth to this, though I find it a little disingenuous. We thrive on competition, and that means beating someone else, not just setting a personal best. Ask any Olympic runner who breaks a world record but finishes second how he feels. We don't need to wonder if he'd trade a tenth of a second for a gold instead of silver. We all work harder, run faster when someone is on our heels. Some of my best performances benefited from close competition. Like racing dogs chasing a rabbit, we push ourselves higher when we have a rival to match us stride for stride. Although I continued to play attacking chess throughout my career, my games became more concrete and less speculative. In my 30s, after a decade as a world champion, I was less likely to launch uncertain assaults and more likely to be patient. It wasn't just age, it was experience. I wasn't playing differently, but better. I learned that a well-timed counterattack could be more effective than always meeting fire with fire. I no longer felt I had to prove something by launching an all-out attack in every game. My approach became more scientific, more professional. I was there to win, not to make a statement. Greg, I think what Casper is talking about here really falls under that bigger theme we've explored on this podcast, playing to win versus playing not to lose.
Yeah, 100% Duncan. This is textbook playing to win mindset. I don't think playing not to lose and being aggressive really works together. What Kasparov's showing us here is the evolution of a champion. Early on, he's aggressive because it works and he likes it, which is a nice hand-in-hand moment, right? But then comes the deeper shift, not necessarily away from aggression, but a little bit more towards perhaps precision. And that's where I think it really gets interesting. He doesn't abandon his style. He sharpens it. He polishes it to a little bit of a finer point. He evolves. And that's playing to win over time, not just in those discrete moments within games. And this line really stood out to me. Having an aggressive philosophy also applies to being aggressive with ourselves. And I think, Duncan, it's not just about beating others, it's about challenging your own complacency and pushing your own boundaries. That's what separates a season of success from a career of greatness.
Another really great breakdown, Greg, and another added benefit of being aggressive or being known as being aggressive is that an opponent may actually constantly feel under threat. He says, a concept related to this initiative was elucidated by Aaron Nimcevich, who wrote, the threat is stronger than the execution. I
Well
tried
done.
with
You
that
did
name.
well. You did well to get through that sentence.
Yeah. An attack doesn't have to come to fruition to have a devastating effect. If our opponent rushes to defend an area, it may lead to a win elsewhere. Nymphowitches. Okay, I don't know. I don't
Man,
know.
he's gone backwards. It's all gone wrong.
Yeah.
Nimzovich.
Nimzovich. All right, these Russian names. Nimzovich's phrase is also about perception, akin to the Wall Street line buy the rumor, sell the news. Anticipation can be more powerful than the event itself. Impact is impact. Shouting fire in a crowded theatre causes the same reaction, at least initially, whether or not there is a fire. The aggressive mentality of successfully attacking requires a readiness to upset the status quo, even a passion for it. Defense, to be fair, is more rational in many ways. A military maxim says a successful attack requires 3 times the resources of a defender. Defending involves conserving resources and minimizing exposure, both natural tendencies. The defender also has fewer angles to cover, needing only to protect his own weaknesses. Greg, there's a lot in there, and I was all over the place. So what you got for me?
Yeah, first of all, please don't shout fire in crowded theatres, regardless of whatever reaction that's going to get. Please don't do that. Where do I begin? I think the psychological edge of aggression, I think this is where he's really starting to show it kicking in. When you're known as aggressive, your opponent, he almost plays the reputation of you as opposed to the real you. They overthink. If we're talking about being on the front foot, they certainly over defend and probably open doors that wouldn't otherwise have been open for you. And I love that. The threat is stronger than the execution. That's brilliant because it reminds us that the perception of what you're doing can actually be weaponized. You don't always have to strike, but just the possibility that you might be able to do that, that can shape the behavior of your opponent. And that's influence. That's pressure that you're applying to your opponent without really doing anything. And this applies way beyond chess. So let's have a think about that. I think in sport, a forward, a striker, a centre forward, someone that has explosive pace on the football field, soccer field, they pull defenders deep even when they don't make the run because the threat of that speed, the threat of that run is always there and defenders don't want to get burned. In business, if you have a bold reputation, that can shake up a negotiation before even the first meeting if you have this kind of bulldog mentality that people are aware of. And I think in leadership, setting really high standards gets people to level up even before you actually ask them to do that. Here's a takeaway for all of our listeners. Don't just manage your performance. You've got to manage your presence as well. If you carry yourself like a threat, you force other people to adapt.
Greg, you really explained that incredibly well. You took way more out of it than I did, and I really love that breakdown. And as you said all that, I think somewhat the opposite of aggression is really complacency. And again, this is a really nice section. He talks about that concept, and he says, success is the enemy of future success. Complacency is a dangerous enemy. Satisfaction can lead to a lack of vigilance, to mistakes and missed opportunities. Success and satisfaction are our goals, but they can also lead to negative patterns that impede greater success or even cause failure at a key moment. This is the gravity of past success. Winning creates an illusion that everything is fine. There's a strong temptation to think only of the positive result, ignoring what went wrong or could have. After a victory, we want to celebrate, not analyze. We replay the moments in our minds until it seems inevitable. Similar habits form in our daily lives. The old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, should be left to plumbing, not how we live and work. We must question the status quo, especially when things are going well.
I love that, Duncan. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Leave that to plumbing. Uh, I think it is all pretty self-explanatory, as you say. And for me, it comes back to that maxim: you don't have to be sick to get better.
Yeah, that's a great and simple maxim. And how many times have we seen people reach the very top in their respective area and then struggle to maintain it? And as such, I love this little anecdote. And he says, on November 9th, 1985, I achieved my lifelong goal of becoming world champion, if you can call it a lifelong goal at 22. During the celebrations, I was taken aback by the words of Rona
Petrosian.
thank you with the pronunciation, the wife of a former world champion, who said, I feel sorry for you, she said. The greatest day of your life is over. I often heard those words in my head in the years that followed. The next 15 years were a battle to augment my strengths and eliminate my weaknesses. I was always convinced that if I worked as hard as I could and played to the best of my ability, no one could defeat me. And I felt that way until I retired in February 2005.
Duncan, when we say that words have power, that one comment, which feels like almost a throwaway comment at the time, that stuck with him for life. I feel sorry for you. The greatest day of your life is over.
Yeah, and again, that really comes back to that concept of once you reach the top, there's nowhere to go. But obviously, he really internalized it, and he fought against that concept for the next 15 years. And he goes on to say, creative and competitive energy is tangible, and if we can feel it, so can our opponents. Our confidence is reflected in how we move and talk, not just what we say, but how we say it. If you want to be taken seriously, take yourself seriously. I was always credited with or accused of a terrible level of intimidation at the board. Bobby Fischer caused Fischer fear. Mikhail Tal was said to have hypnotized opponents with his magnetic glare. If I had a threatening demeanor, it came from believing that chess was serious business, and that I had to show my opponent I would do everything I could to beat him.
Duncan, it's such a powerful reminder that your presence speaks before you do. Confident, it's not just a thought, it's a signal to the outside world. You can feel it. You can feel confidence in someone's posture. You can hear it in their tone, their pace, their intensity. You walk into a room or in a court without saying a word, people know whether you're there to compete or not. Going back to that line, if you want to be taken seriously, take yourself seriously. That just applies to so many facets of a high performance lifestyle. If energy is contagious, you've got to make sure yours is something worth catching.
I love that you pulled out that line. If you want to be taken seriously, take yourself seriously. That line really stood out for me. I thought that's such a great takeaway. It's one I'm going to store for sure. And he says, a defeat can be doubly damaging when you feel you've done your best and still failed. This is contrary to the typical consolation, you did your best. We're supposed to feel better knowing we couldn't have done more. Yet someone aspiring to be a world champion doesn't want to hear that he did his best and was still beaten convincingly. Could there be anything worse? As much as we enjoy winning, and winning every time would be ideal, setbacks are inevitable and are required for progress. The art is avoiding catastrophic losses in key battles. Greg, when I heard that phrase, catastrophic battles, it really, really resonated with me. What are your thoughts on that notion?
Yeah, he's not just talking about losing here. He's talking about losing in a way that derails certainly momentum, possibly identity, certainly confidence and belief. I think a catastrophic loss, that's a great phrase. It's not just about the scoreboard, it's about the sort of the psychological fallout that comes as a result of it. It's the kind of loss that changes you if you let it. One powerful example of a potential catastrophic loss is Rory McIlroy, and I think it was the 2011 Masters.
Yeah.
And he had that 4-shot lead on a Sunday, and we all saw how much that collapse impacted him going forward. And he's openly reflected on it since, and some of his interviews on that is really, really influential. That's part of what made his recent 2025 Masters win, which was his first major victory in over a decade, so meaningful. It wasn't just about that win or that feeling of winning again. It was about rebuilding after a really career-defining setback. And we often see this sort of pattern in combat sports, especially in boxing. So let's go back to episode, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, I think it was episode 30 with Sugar Ray Leonard. And
Correct.
yeah, there we go. And his rematch with Roberto Hands of Stone Duran, one of the great nicknames. So Sugar Ray, he just completely flipped the script. And after that second fight, Duran, if you remember, quit on his stool. He was never quite the same. The loss just didn't beat him physically. It sort of rattled and loosened something deeper within him. And that's the kind of psychological fallout that really categorizes this catastrophic loss, as Kasparov puts it. So I'm going to continue with the boxing theme. You can say that a knockdown is not the same as a knockout. We all get knocked down from time to time, and you could argue that that's almost necessary to make us better, but getting knocked out is a whole other matter.
Yeah, I love that. Knocked down, but not knocked out. Fantastic. So, something Kasparov is very famous for is his 1996 and 1997 matches against IBM's Deep Blue supercomputer, which we alluded to right at the beginning, which actually drew massive global attention because it kind of raised questions about artificial intelligence and that idea of fairness and man versus machine, as it were. His 1996 win and the 1997 loss were overshadowed by IBM's decision to shut down the Deep Blue supercomputer immediately after, thus avoiding a third match. And it really fueled suspicion about what actually happened in that second match. Kasparov's criticized IBM's dual role as both opponent and organizer of the event, citing a lack of transparency and unusual moves by the computer that remain unexplained. The thought was that he was paranoid at the time, but his concerns might have actually been right, that he was playing both against Deep Blue and a human has kind of gained credibility over time. So a really interesting part of the book, which we won't go into too much, but he says, what would a combination of human tuition and computer calculation produce? An invincible centaur or a Frankenstein monster? The challenge of chess programming lies in its vast complexity. So, Greg, I had to look this up. This is kind of wild. The math is actually mind-boggling. So, for context, and I know you're not a chess player, but in most chess positions, they say you have about 40 legal moves to choose from. So your opponent also has 40 legal moves to respond to. So just one move from each player, which is 40 times 40, which is 1,600 possible combinations, and that's just one full turn. After two full turns, which is 40 times 40 times 40 times 40, is 2.56 million possible positions. And after three possible moves, it's 4.1 billion positions. Which, when I actually read that, I thought, that is mind-boggling.
It's a good. That's one of the reasons I don't play. To be honest, it sounds like too much hard work.
Yeah, so to finish up, how often do we review our performance at the end of the day? What did we see? What did we learn? Did we observe or experience something new we should take note of? Would we recognize that situation, that opportunity, that pattern, should it occur again? Elite performers like Olympic athletes must be this critical, this self-aware to succeed. The benefits of such rigorous behavior aren't so obvious if you work in an office, but they are there just the same. Even people in leadership roles are too often content to just get through the day. Most people talk about unwinding after work or school, putting the day behind them. How much more effective would they become at the end of each day if they asked themselves what lessons they had taken away for tomorrow? And this is where we'll leave it. But as always, Greg, what is your top 10 life lessons for How Life Imitates Chess by Garry Kasparov?
My top 10 life lessons for How Life Imitates Chess by Garry Kasparov. Number 1, own your own decision-making process. Your great decisions come from understanding how you make them. He says we build our own unique formula for making decisions. The goal is to understand that formula, evaluate it, and find ways to improve it. Number 2, talent must be matched with environment. Natural ability only becomes greatness when paired with opportunity and support. He says talent without exposure is like a spark with no oxygen. It never ignites. Number 3, work ethic is a form of talent. Grit, persistence, and focus are just as valuable and trainable as any natural gift. He says, why isn't the capacity for hard work considered a natural gift? Number 4, discipline means awareness plus action. True discipline isn't perfection. It's intentionality in how we use our time. Kasparov says, having a good work ethic doesn't mean being a fanatic. It means being aware and then taking action. Number 5, be adaptable under pressure. You can't always choose the terrain, but you can choose how to respond. He says, sometimes you're forced to fight on unfamiliar terrain. You can't run away when conditions aren't to your liking. Number 6, ask why constantly. Strategic thinkers challenge assumptions. Every action must connect to a purpose. He says everyone would benefit greatly from stopping before each move, each decision, and asking, why this move? What am I trying to achieve? Number 7, distinguish between strategy and tactics. Strategy is long-term vision. Tactics are moment-to-moment execution. He says tactics is knowing what to do when there is something to do. Strategy is knowing what to do when there is nothing to do. Number 8, build intuition through experience. Intuition isn't magic, it's memory in disguise, earned through reps and reflection. He says intuition is where it all comes together, experience, knowledge, and will. Number 9, aggression creates psychological pressure. Being seen as a threat can shape how others play the game. even before the game begins. He says, the threat is stronger than the execution. And finally, number 10, success is the beginning of the next battle. Complacency is a silent enemy, especially after a win. He says, success is the enemy of future success. Complacency is a dangerous enemy.
Greg, another fantastic top 10, but as always, there are lessons to avoid.
Yes, there are. And here are my top 10 performance traps to avoid from How Life Imitates Chess by Garry Kasparov. Number 1, relying on talent alone. Believing natural ability will carry you the whole way. He says talent undiscovered may as well not exist. Number 2, changing strategy too quickly. Abandoning your plan at the first sign of adversity. He says if you change all the time, you don't have a strategy at all. Number 3, mistaking activity for progress. Forcing moves or decisions just to feel in control. A player without strategic vision forces a crisis and damages his own position. Number 4, ignoring your instincts. Over-relying on data and logic while neglecting experience-based intuition. He says, this reduces us to microprocesses and guarantees our intuition remains stunted. Number 5, chasing the wrong metrics of success. Seeking recognition instead of improvement. He says, I was there to win, not to make a statement. Number 6, fearing failure more than stagnation. Avoid letting perfectionism block progress or innovation. He says if you aren't failing at least occasionally, you aren't taking the risk required to be an innovator. Number 7, trusting a win more than the process. Avoid letting victory hide flaws in your approach. He says winning creates the illusion that everything is fine. Number 8, forgetting to evolve. Avoid holding on to past strategies that no longer serve current challenges. He says what worked before might not work now. Number 9, failing to review your performance. Avoid moving on from your day or match without extracting lessons. And he says, how much more effective would they become if, at the end of each day, they asked themselves what lessons they had taken away for tomorrow. And finally, number 10, letting defeat redefine you. Avoid allowing a tough loss to derail your identity or belief. He says, a defeat can be doubly damaging when we feel like we've done our best and still failed. Thank you so much for joining myself and Duncan on this episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider supporting the show by clicking the link in the show notes and at least share this amazing podcast with the people that you know. See you next time on Performers.